Hello everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the British Isles in OpenTTD. Britain Island, whatever. But we are starting off the episode with the, I'm just going quickly so I can explain, with the North Midland Railway opening its first section from Derby, where it met the other two Midland companies, up to Rotherham, where it meets the Sheffield and Rotherham Railway. Moving on very quickly, we have the Preston and Longridge Railway, which was just a branch line off from Preston to, you guessed it, Longridge. Anyway, in this episode we're going to see Railway Mania. And Railway Mania is, it was a phenomenon, well, it wasn't really a phenomenon, but it was the process in which the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened. This is, by the way, this is the first section of the Manchester and Birmingham Railway opening between Manchester London Road and Stockport. Anyway, it was the, a lot of people saw the Liverpool and Manchester open and make lots and lots of money, and everyone thought, oh, I want in on that. And so hundreds upon hundreds of railways were all proposed and approved in Parliament. And I think in the height of the Railway Mania in the early 1840s, over 200 railways were approved in one session of Parliament. So I'm sure this will definitely not go wrong at all, and won't cause a big bust. Anyway, this is the Lancaster and Preston Junction Railway, extending the line from Preston up to Lancaster. Then moving on down to Bromsgrove for the sorry, hang on, I lost where I am. I'm kind of skipping ahead here, aren't I? It's the Birmingham and Gloucester Railway, that's the one. Opening between Bromsgrove and all the way down to Gloucester Eastgate, the Midland station there. Sorry, found where I am. The way I do things on this big document is I group it into months, and then I do all the ones that are nearby in the months, but that's different to the order that's actually on the document, so I've got to kind of read across and kind of guess what I'm doing. But anyway, this is the Great Western, extending from Reading up to Didcot Junction, where the branch line to Oxford will eventually go off. Moving on, the Eastern Counties Railway is extending from Stratford into its London terminus at Liverpool Street. In reality, it was just to a temporary terminus in Shoreditch, which is so close to it, there's no point really. So just put Liverpool Street straight in. And also at the same time, I'm probably going to do this in a second, yep, the London and Blackwall Railway is opening between London and Fenchurch Street, which is near Tower Hill, and Poplar. Well, not Poplar, Blackwall, which is in Poplar. The Midland Counties Railway is now extending its line from Leicester down into Rugby, where it meets the West Coast Main Line. And this junction will eventually become important because it will become the point at which Midland Railway expresses branch off from Rugby and run up through Leicester and Derby, then onto Leeds, because the Midland Main Line down into London independently didn't open until the 1860s. We'll see that develop over time. The North Midland Railway is now extending from Rotherham and Masborough up into Leeds Wellington Street, which is built directly next to the other station in Leeds, which was Leeds City. And then some point in the late 1800s, they actually rebuilt both of those stations into one big one, Leeds New, which is the Leeds station we know and love today. The North Midland Railway ran through Normanton, I'm not sure, where it becomes a junction with the Manchester and Leeds Railway, which we'll later see, and the York and North Midland Railway, which has actually already reached Normanton at this point, but I forgot to put it in, because of course I did. I'll go on and add that later, off camera. Because I'm sure by you guessed the name York and North Midland, the whole point of the railway was to add a branch line off the North Midland Railway into York. Figuring out the names of all the railway companies is a puzzle in itself. Especially when you get the crazy names which we'll see later on. Here we have the Hull and Selby Railway opening from the junction at Selby all the way into Hull English Street, which is a temporary terminus just on the docks, right by the water in Hull. Now the, what is this? This is the Preston and Wyre Railway opening from Preston up to Fleetwood. Because at the time Blackpool wasn't really, well, Fleetwood was a major port and Blackpool wasn't really, it was just a holiday destination for the most part. And although the line to Fleetwood isn't open today, it used to be a major port. And at one point I think Fleetwood was actually the second biggest fishing port in the British Isles. Sorry, no, it was the second biggest in the world, I think, at some point. Now the Maryport and Carlisle Railway, just opening its first section from Maryport inland to a village called Aspatria. And also the Glasgow and Paisley Joint Railway, opening from Glasgow Bridge Street to Paisley Central, not Paisley Central, Paisley Gilmore Street. Because there was two railways that was promoted at the same time in Parliament. There was the Glasgow, Paisley and Greenock Railway, and the Glasgow, Paisley, Kilmarnock and Ayr Railway. Kilmarnock and Ayr. But the line between Glasgow and Paisley on both those proposals was pretty much identical, so Parliament just said you're going to build one line together and it's going to be jointly owned. So that's what they did, and that's how the line that eventually became, well, the line that's still open between Glasgow and Paisley today. But also at the same time, the Glasgow, Paisley, Kilmarnock and Ayr Railway, opening its main line from Paisley down to Ayr. See, this is why some railway companies such as had extremely long names. Glasgow, Paisley, Kilmarnock and Ayr. That's 4 different places. You really need to include all of them in your name. Also at the same time, the Ardrossan Railway. Ardrossan Railway opened as a branch line off the main line here to, you guessed it, Ardrossan. Because that was a major port off to the Western Isles, into the Firth of Clyde. I'll be building that one in a moment. Here we have the Lockney Railway opening, which was supposed to be in the last episode, but I didn't want to put it in, so I'll put it in now. And the Slamanan Railway, which as a branch line off the Lockney Railway, extended through Slamanan to Manual, where it met the Glasgow and Edinburgh Canal. And we also have the Chester and Birkenhead Railway, opening from Chester General Station up to Birkenhead, which is on the other side of the water to Liverpool, where a ferry will take people across. The Birkenhead station that it's opening to is Birkenhead Woodside, one that isn't open today, but it was one that was right on the water. where the ferries could take people across. Moving on back down, the Northern and Eastern Railway is opening between Stratford and Broxbourne. Now the Northern Eastern Railway, it was eventually, well, it was originally, the plan was to build a line from Stratford up through Cambridge and Lincoln, all the way to York. So it was a pretty big proposal, and I think it did get permission to build all that, but they ran out of money by, they had ran out of money before they had even reached Cambridge. So eventually just became the West Anglian line that we know. Here we have the Taff Vale Railway opening between the Cardiff Queen Street and the line down to Cardiff Bay over up to Abercynon. If that's how it's pronounced. I don't know what's worse, the Welsh, the Irish, or the Scottish names. All counts. Yeah, the Taff Railway was originally opened in broad gauge, because they knew that the Great Western would eventually be coming over to this area. And it was just one to help transport coal and iron from the Cardiff valleys down to Cardiff, where it would be transported onto freighters. Yet another colliery to water line. We're still getting those, we thought I'd escaped the woods from them. But here the Grand Junction Railway is extending from Crewe to Chester, which is really turning Crewe into the Grand Junction that it wanted to be now. And also the is this what I'm looking at? Yes, the Manchester and Leeds Railway, opening, it's one of the sections from Normanton, or Normanton, I'm not sure, to, I think it's to Hebden Bridge, I'm not quite sure, yes, Hebden Bridge. Because just after Hebden Bridge there was a section between Littleborough and Todmorden, where there's a big tunnel, and it took a few years for the company to dig that tunnel, which is why there's a big delay and the two sections were separated. But yeah, both the Manchester and Leeds Railway decided to get access to York and Leeds via Normanton, a junction there, and then just using the Midland. But why waste money building your own line when you can use someone else's? Now the Birmingham and Gloucester Railway is extending from Bromsgrove into Birmingham Curzon Street via Kings Norton and the Eastern Line, because today there's two lines that run from Bromsgrove into Birmingham. Excuse me. In reality, it just opened to a temporary terminus at Camp Hill, but it was just so far away it would be absolutely useless. Now we have the Great Western Railway extending from Didcot Junction into Swindon. The Great Western Railway's Swindon station was called Swindon Junction, because eventually there will be another station in Swindon, although just a much smaller one. Now we have the Great North of England Railway opening from York up to Darlington. Now the original, the Great North of England Railway, it was approved to build all the way into Newcastle, but once again it just ran out of money. So the section between York and Darlington is the oldest part of the East Coast Main Line that's still in use today. And it opened in January 1841. And if you look at it, it's actually incredibly flat and straight. So I don't know how the hell they ran out of money. Also, while we're in the north, I assume we're going to be doing that. It'd be stupid if we didn't. I'll start talking about it now. No, I'm doing the other one first. The Bolton and Preston Railway. Is that what I'm doing? No, I'm not doing that. Sorry, my bad. This is the Manchester and Birmingham Railway, extending from Stockport into Crewe. Because from Crewe, it just used the Grand Junction Railway to get access to Birmingham, which is why they managed to include that in the name. You'll see this happen a lot. Rail companies try and make their name as big and glamorous as possible to attract customers, even if they didn't go to those places. The most extreme of which I believe is the Manchester and Milford Railway, which in reality was just a tiny little few mile long branch line from Newtown in mid Wales. I'll explain more about that one later. Also, the Taff Vale Railway is extending a branch line from Pontypridd into Dinas. And the Bolton and Preston Railway is opening from Bolton Trinity Street, where it met the Manchester and Bolton. Sorry, is it the Manchester and Bolton? Yeah, it is. But it only opened as far as Chorley. Now we have the Stockton and Hartlepool Railway, opening from Stockton North Road Station. Well, it didn't even open to Stockton, it opened from Billingham, branching on from the Clarence Railway into Hartlepool West Station. I think it actually went as further north in Hartlepool West into Hartlepool Central, even though that's further away from Hartlepool. But also, I did this off camera. This is a big thing. I actually I spent several days going across the whole map, putting in hundreds and hundreds of industries. So we have freight trains now, finally. I'm very happy about that. So you can see we have coal trains running from the coal fields down to the industries at Teesside. And we have a few more down up here in Scotland. Now we have the Manchester and Leeds Railway extending from Littleborough to Hebden Bridge, completing that big tunnel. Littleborough Tunnel, I'll put that in now. So we'll finally have through services from Manchester all the way into Leeds. And now the Glasgow, Paisley and Greenock Railway, opening from a branch off Paisley into Gourock. Actually, although I say Gourock, I'm not sure if Gourock actually opened. I think it might have just been to Greenock at this time, but the branches, the line was just extra so small that I thought it might as well. Because of the scale difference, I hadn't put in every single little extension, because at some point the lines were really just extended by like one station, and that would mean putting in an extra town or whatever, and that would just be too much. It would be kind of pointless. He was trying to decide what shipping service I was trying to put in out of the Western Isles, but I thought, nah, I'll do that off camera, so that's exactly what I did. Here I am setting up some freight services from the coal mines that the Bristol and Gloucestershire Railway was actually built for, down into a coke oven in Bristol. I'll extend that chain later when we have more industries linked up, and more railways in Bristol. Now we have the Taff Vale Railway, extending its main line from Abercynon to Merthyr Plymouth Street. This one was a little bit awkward to put in because the valley was so tight, and eventually there will be another line on the other side of the valley. So yeah, the South Wales valleys are going to be very tight. I'll figure it out though. Well, we're in the Great Western region. the Great Western Railway is extending from sorry, 2 months. The Great Western Railway is extending from Swindon to Chippenham. Sorry, I just got confused because I was looking at the wrong thing, because literally 1 month later it's going to be extending from Chippenham into Bristol. I was just looking at the wrong thing, I thought I'd messed up. Nope, it's just extending its main line from Swindon into Chippenham. And also at the same time, the Cheltenham and Great Western Union Railway, as implied by the name, was proposed to, was authorised to build a main line, to build a branch, sorry, of Swindon to, off the Great Western Railway at Swindon, up to Cheltenham. God, I'm tripping over my words here. Too many junctions, too many main lines, too many railways. Anyway, it only really got as far as, the main line got as far as Kemble, and then there was a branch line from Kemble into Cirencester, which also opened at the same time. Here we go, 1 month later, the Great Western Railway extending from Chippenham into Bristol Temple Mead Station. Which finally completes the Great Western Main Line. Exciting. Those the big new hotel buildings in towns, they have proven to be very useful because they generate thousands of passengers, which means that any station can be absolutely crowded. I think by the 1842, I'm getting loads of passengers going from Cheltenham Spa all the way up to Fleetwood. So I was getting a massive profit on those trains. I spent a while trying to figure out how I'd do Bristol, because it needs to be jointly owned, because the station was eventually jointly owned by the Great Western Railway and the Midland Railway. So I had to put that in as a separate company and mess around with ownership and all that, but I figured it out eventually. I'm just going to mess around with goods trains for a little while I'm waiting for the time to tick over. Because I did actually get a functional chain going in the northeast. I had lots of iron and coal going into Concert Steelworks, and then steel going down to the processing plants on the Tyne, which is then being exported. So I had a very functional chain, but it just took a while for you to get all the industries, all the stations lined up properly, because the trains kept getting clogged up and running into each other. Back to actual railway construction, we have the Bristol and Exeter Railway, opening between Bristol Temple Meads and Bridgewater Central. But with a branch to Weston-super-Mare Locking Road. Because at the minute, in the current day, Weston-super-Mare is served by a loop line that runs off the main line and then goes back in. But that didn't open until much later, so for the first couple of decades, Weston was served by a little branch line like this. We also have some industries at Bridgewater that we can serve later. I think we're going to do most of the goods traffic figuring out off camera, because there's so many industries I have to figure out, lots of different chains to run between them. So I think I'll be doing all of that off camera. And I won't be able to complete a lot of the chains until a lot of later railways open, because I don't want to go out and wait to build a branch line just to serve one industry. Now we have the London and Brighton Railway extending from Norwood Junction near Croydon down to Haywards Heath, through East Croydon Station over the top of the hill to Redhill near Crawley, and 3 bridges down to Haywards Heath. Now the Brighton main line between Croydon and Redhill was quite complicated, because there was 2 companies that wanted to own it. There was the London Brighton Railway and there was the South Eastern Railway. So eventually they just built two parallel lines that weren't connected. They weren't like actual on the same track bed. They ran on either side of the valley, owned by the two separate companies, and one of them even put a bypass around Redhill. And that, I think the bypass is actually still open today. I think the two lines are still in use. I think the one of them had all the stations closed though, and that one's used for expresses. Sorry, I'm just giving my vocal cords a minute to recover. My asthma's been acting up lately. It's probably the slightly warmer weather. Now we have the I'll be there in a moment. I'm just going to figure out some goods trains. This footage was recorded weeks ago, by the way. Like the footage is recorded, I think it was mid-April. Now it's early May, so I can't quite remember exactly what I was doing. I know what I'm doing, and that's the trains kept getting stuck with each other within the steelworks at Concert. So I tried to redesign the track plan like 5 times so it would actually work. Because in reality, obviously, there'd be multiple facilities in a steelworks, and you have a little shunter that carries materials across. As you can see, one train's just going between the two little sheds there. Whereas I think the game's expecting them all to be quite far apart. Anyway, here we have the Seg Hill Railway, opening between a dock on the Tyne at Percy Main and up to Seg Hill. Just a little, another little colliery railway, but it'll become more important later. And now we have the Kilmarnock and Troon Railway, opened from the docks at Troon up into Kilmarnock. Now it actually opened in 1812, but it was just more of it was a horse-drawn tramway. So I've put it in now at the date it was converted to steam traction. And now the London and Brighton Railway is completing its main line from Haywards Heath down into Brighton. So we finally have a completed Brighton main line. Moving across into Ireland, the Ulster Railway is extending from the current terminus at Lisburn into Lurgan. It was just a short extension, just an extra few stations, but I put it in anyway because it was a fair few miles. And that means the railway is also approaching an important junction at Portadown. Back into the island of Great Britain, we have the Sheffield, Ashton, Underline and Manchester Railway, opening between Manchester London Road and Godley, which is near Hyde. The Manchester Ashton Underline and Sheffield Ashton Underline and Manchester Railway will eventually become much more important, as you'll see. Although if you know much about railway history, that name will sound familiar. I'm sure some of you even know what will come of it. But the this London and South Western Railway is extending from Eastleigh to Fareham and eventually down to Gosport. Because the people at Portsmouth were very worried that Southampton was going to take all its passenger traffic away. Not passenger traffic, just general traffic, because the port of Southampton was being served by a direct line to London. And the people at Portsmouth complained, and the London and South Western Railway agreed to build a branch line down into Portsmouth. But they ran out of money, so they could only afford a branch line to the other side of the water at Gosport. Now we have the Edinburgh and Glasgow Railway, opening between Glasgow Queen Street and Edinburgh Haymarket, running via Falkirk High Station, Bonnie Bridge, and a new town at Lenzie. Sorry, not Lenzie, Lenny. I learned this on a rail tour. One of the directors of the Scottish Railway Preservation Society actually personally told me, corrected me, saying you don't pronounce the Z's in Scottish names. For example, Coleshian Castle is actually Colleen Castle, and then Lenzie is actually Lenny. So I actually got scolded by a director of a rail tour company on that. Anyway, this is the current main line between Edinburgh and Glasgow that we know today, and it only opened between Manchester Haymarket Station. Anyway, Lenny town was actually a brand new town because the only town at the time was Kirkintilloch. But the Edinburgh and Glasgow Railway actually funded the construction of a brand new town there, so there'd be more passengers on the railway line. Now we have the Birmingham and Derby Junction Railway extending from a junction at Kingbury into Birmingham Lawley Street. This also means that the line between Kingbury and Hampton and Arden, which is that one going south there, it became relegated to just a tiny little branch line. And I think later that'll actually become one of the first railway closures in the country. The Manchester and Leeds Railway is building a branch line off its main line at Middleton Junction into Oldham Central. There's actually about 4 stations in Oldham, but I'll put them in later. That's a problem for future me to worry about. Also, I've done this off camera. This is the Stanhope and Tyne Railway. Went bankrupt, and so it renamed itself to the Pontop and South Shields Railway and sold all of its lines west of Consett. It's very minor, but I've got it on there, so I'm going to mention it. Now the Northern and Eastern Railways extending from... sorry, 2 months. From Broxbourne into Bishop Stortford. Still pursuing its dream of reaching York, but I don't think I'll be getting there anytime soon. Now the South Eastern Railway is opening between the main line at Redhill that I mentioned earlier, through Edenbridge and into Tonbridge. The current South Eastern main line from Tonbridge runs directly through Sevenoaks into London, but that requires crossing hills, so the original main line branched off there from Redhill, as I'm sure you can all see because you have eyes. Although if you're blind watching this video, hi, I hope my voice isn't too annoying. I'll move on now, I'm not funny. The Bristol and Exeter Railway is extending from Bridgewater Central into Taunton. Nothing much to say about that. Pretty flat line. Moving back up into Edinburgh, we have the Edinburgh, Leith and Newhaven Railway opening between Edinburgh Cannon Street, or something, or Cannon Mills or something, and at Granton. And the docks at Granton become important because, I'll explain that later, you'll see in the next episode. But Edinburgh Scotland Street or Cannon Mill Station, it was so close to Edinburgh Waverley and there was different deviations and stuff, so I just decided not to include that. I've put it in a different place as to what's in reality. That's all you need to know. Go look it up on a rail map online if you want to go find out more. But this is the Ulster Railway extending from Lurgan to Portadown, and then the South Eastern Railway immediately after that extending from Tonbridge into Ashford. The line between Redhill and Ashford is pretty much a straight line. It's actually impressive. It's just because they chose the flattest ground possible to build the line on. Probably to save money. But now we have the Eastern Counties Railway extending from Romford into Colchester. via Brentwood and Kelmsford. The lines are quadruple tracked as far as Kempsford, because that's when commuter services stop and there's only really express services after that. Now the Eastern Counties Railway, it's currently reached Colchester, but they do actually have approval to build the line even further and go all the way to Norwich. But yeah, yet again they ran out of money. So they actually ran out of money, went so bankrupt. Another company was eventually formed to complete the line, and you'll see that later. I keep talking too much, I'm just spoiling it, I'm giving out spoilers. I can't help myself. Sorry about the computer noise, by the way, I just have a really old and loud computer. It's overdue its replacement date. Anyway, the Glasgow, Paisley, Kilmarnock and Ayr Railway is building a branch line from Dalry into Kilmarnock. And the Maryport and Carlisle Railway is building another section of its main line between Carlisle, Crown Street and Wigston. It isn't until the end of the episode that we see the two sections linked. But the Bolton and Preston Railway is completing its line from Chorley onto the junction at Leyland, where trains then run over the North Union Railway into Preston. And now the South Eastern Railway once again is extending from Ashford into Folkestone. The South Eastern extended its line so quickly that the trains don't actually have time to catch up. The North and Eastern Railway quickly building a branch line from Broxbourne into Hertford East. Now the Bishop Auckland and Weardale Railway building a branch line from Shildon on the Stockton and Darlington through Bishop Auckland and into Crook. I put it in as passenger, but in reality it was just because there's more coal mines up there that the railways wanted to exploit. The Leeds and Selby Railway has been absorbed by the York and North Midland Railway, which will become more important later because, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to spoil it, but it'll become important. The South Eastern Railway, and the Northern and Eastern Railway has been absorbed by the Eastern Counties Railway, so there goes that company's dream of reaching York. And the South Eastern Railway has finally completed its main line from Folkestone into Dover Marine Station. The Wishaw and Coltness Railway is extending its main line from Moss End through Motherwell into Morningside, because there's a big steelworks in Morningside and lots of more coal mines around the place. Once again, I'll be doing all the industry and the goods trains off camera. Anyway, this is the Dalkey Atmospheric Railway, opening between Kingstown and Dalkey. As the name suggests, this was an atmospheric railway, using a vacuum tube between the rails to pull the carriages along. Wasn't successful, never was, tried a few times, never successful. Anyway, this is the Norwich and Yarmouth Railway, opening between Norwich Thorpe Station and Yarmouth Vauxhall. Now this is the first line to actually cross the Broads. So what it did when I was making the map is I just kind of put it in as the Broads were flooded, because in reality the ground level is actually pretty much below or very, very close to water level. So I couldn't really simulate that in game, so I've just said, oh, the Broads have just been flooded. So I've just put it in like embankments across them, which I think will look really cool once we get trains running over them. The Bristol and Exeter Railway is extending its main line from Taunton down to Exeter, completing its main line actually. The Bristol and Exeter Railway is actually it was another broad gauge line. That's just because it was connected to the Great Western, so it didn't really have a choice. And it was heavily influenced by the Great Western. I think it actually shared some directors. The Bolton and Preston Railway has been absorbed by the North Union Railway, and the Midland Railway has finally been formed by the Midland Counties Railway, the North Midland Railway, and the Birmingham and Derby Junction Railway, all merging into one big company. The dawn of the Midland Railway, which has become very important and very, very powerful. Now we have the West London Railway opening between Willesden Junction through Old Oak Common and Kensington into Clapham Junction. This is the first time all the railways south of the country and north of the country have been linked. Back over into Ireland for the opening of the Dublin and Drogheda Railway, opening between Dublin Amiens Street, or Amiens, which is today Dublin Connolly, up through... mine's gone blank, I'm so sorry, but opening to Drogheda along the east coast. Across the Malahide Viaduct, important railway landmark, and past all the coastal resorts at Balbriggan into Drogheda. They wanted to extend the line further, but they got across the River Boyne, so they couldn't quite do that yet. And the Boyne Viaduct is still today a big major structure on Irish railways. The Newcastle and Darlington Junction Railway is opening between Darlington and Leamside, where it meets the Durham Junction Railway, which earlier took over, which means that it can operate passenger services and through services from Darlington directly into Newcastle. Now we're approaching the end of the episode, so I'm probably going to have to quickly end it, abruptly end the recording. But right now we're seeing the Great Western Railway extending from Didcot into Oxford, the branch line. Anyway, the way the recording ends and stuff, I might not get the chance to properly say goodbye at the end of the episode. It's just the way I do things. Now the Bristol and Gloucester Railway is opening between Mangotsfield and Gloucester, and it also took over the Bristol and Gloucestershire Railway. I told you the names are confusing. The section between just south of Gloucester, I think it was actually 4 tracks, with 2 of them being owned by the Midland and 2 of them being owned by the Great Western. But I didn't want to really put it in like that because it's awkward in the game, so I just put it in as a joint line. Now we have the Manchester and Leeds Railway building a branch line from Sowerby Bridge into Halifax. Halifax town station, actually, with a triangular junction at the bottom end. Also the Brandling Junction Railway, which is the line between Sunderland and Newcastle, being absorbed by the Newcastle and Darlington. And also the South Eastern Railway extending a branch line from Paddock Wood into Maidstone. Today the Medway Valley line. The Sheffield Rotherham Railway is being absorbed by the Midland Railway, so it can gain direct access to Sheffield, and the Newcastle North Shields Railway being absorbed by the Newcastle and Berwick Railway. That'll become more important later. With only 2 things left to do in the episode, Merrick Carlisle completing its line, and also the Warwick and Leamington Union Railway opening between Coventry and Leamingham. That's it for the episode. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.